Hello, I am Peter Okwacha. Welcome to Focus on Africa, our top stories. The victorious Springboks return to a hero's welcome in South Africa. This is the scene live at the Oliver Tambo International Airport in Johannesburg.
The mood is electric here. South Africans have turned out in their hundreds and they are singing, chanting, dancing. South Africans are here to welcome the best rugby team in the world.
A major aid effort gets underway to help victims of devastating flooding in Somalia amid fears of an outbreak of deadly disease. The most dangerous seas in the world will be asking why piracy is on the increase in West Africa. Also on the program, dancing to her own tune. The 8-year-old refusing to be defined by her brittle bone condition.
I can stretch my arm like everybody does. But with the help of God, I can stretch my brain so I can do great things.
And in sport, the Presidential Investigation Panel case against the Nigeria Football Federation is dropped. Thanks for joining us here on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. It's been a hero's homecoming in South Africa where crowds have lined the streets of Johannesburg and thronged outside Oliver Tambo Airport to welcome home the victorious Springboks rugby team who became world champions in Japan. The triumphant team are arriving on a series of flights today and tomorrow. Let's cross live now to Milton and Kosi, who is at the Oliver Tambo International Airport on the outskirts of Johannesburg. And Milton, everybody everybody's singing there.
Yes, indeed, Peter. The atmosphere at the Oliver Tambo International Airport is electric. South Africans have come out in their hundreds to welcome the best rugby team in the world. As you can see, they are dancing, singing, chanting, celebrating. And there's a brass band right in the center of the arrivals hall. Something that people haven't seen here probably ever. And we hear that the aircraft has landed.
Milton, that's the aircraft bringing in the captain, Siya Kolisi, and the coach, Rassie Erasmus, I guess.
Oh yes, indeed. That's the aircraft that was delayed out of Sydney. It has now landed. It's got the first black captain of the South African rugby team and the best coach in the world. They've just landed. They're going to come through, Peter, from those doors there. And these people are waiting to welcome them.
And indeed, what a welcome it will be, because it also happens to be Rassie Erasmus, the coach's birthday today. Did you know that?
Oh yes, indeed. There are so many histories around this whole trip, this whole rugby cup. It is absolutely incredible what we are seeing here. Black and white together, rural and urban. People are coming together in a way that we haven't seen in many years. Remember, Peter, I was here in 1995 when the Springboks won their very first Rugby World Cup. And this takes me back to those scenes when Nelson Mandela was leading the chant. And today, the South Africans are doing it by themselves. They are doing it organically. But Nomsa Maseko, my colleague, has been talking to a few supporters here. And this is what they told her.
I think this 80 minutes that happened on Saturday changed the world. I think it changed South Africa. I think we don't see color anymore. I mean, as we were standing here, there was whites, there was blacks, there was Indians, coloreds, it was everybody. The Rainbow Nation actually that Mandela was fighting for.
This is a team that's completely different. They're setting a new precedence in South Africa.
Which one's your favorite player?
Siya Kolisi.
Why?
Because he's the captain.
Do you think that Siya Kolisi and his background, coming from a poor background and how he was raised, do you think that he will be able to inspire more young black people to also play rugby?
Yes, he will. He will also inspire people to also believe in themselves, that everybody has something inside them.
And Peter, you heard there for yourself what the people were talking about. There's hope in this. It's not just about the scoreline on the pitch and on the day of the match. It's much more than that.
Okay, Milton and Cozy live there in Johannesburg at the Oliver Tambo Airport, where the plane bringing in Siya Kolisi, the captain of the Springboks, and the coach Rassie Erasmus has just landed, we've been told. Hopefully we'll be going back to those scenes later on in the program. Now, a major aid effort is underway to help victims of severe flooding in Somalia amidst fears of an outbreak of deadly diseases like malaria. Heavy rains have killed at least 10 people and displaced over 350,000. Now, aid is being sent in from a range of donors, including Somalis in the diaspora. The United Nations and Qatar, a longtime ally of Somalia. The BBC's Emmanuel Legunza reports.
It's a desperate cling to life. The worst-hit region is in southern Somalia, where two main rivers burst their banks, flooding farms and submerging entire villages. Authorities say at least a dozen people have died, many more are still missing. Nearly 300,000 have been displaced by the raging waters and are now in urgent need of food, clean water and shelter, which is now slowly trickling in.
This is food that doesn't need preparation and immediately can support children, mothers and everybody else that will need immediate response. In the meantime, we are bringing more commodities as the regular food basket to be able to support up to 2 months the area of Belletrain and surrounded locations which are flooded.
It was just 3 months ago that the people here were affected by the worst drought in 3 decades. Somalia's president has appealed for international support in helping those affected.
We came here to express our sympathies to those affected by the recurrent floods. We know that last year's floods were the worst on record, but this year the floods may eclipse what we experienced last year. For those affected by the floods, may Allah grant mercy to those who have perished and the displaced.
Across the eastern Horn of Africa, the month of October alone has seen widespread heavy flooding. In Tanzania, northern Kenya, South Sudan and Ethiopia. With more heavy rains expected beyond the end of November, meteorologists are warning of an imminent humanitarian crisis in the region. Emmanuel Legunza, BBC News.
Now, 2 separate attacks in the Gulf of Guinea in the last few days has put the spotlight on piracy in the West African region. 4 crew members were kidnapped and a guard was shot dead after a kidnapping from a Greek oil tanker off the coast of Togo on Monday. This follows an attack on Saturday where 9 Filipino sailors were abducted from a Norwegian ship off the coast of Benin. The Gulf is the world's most dangerous hotspot for piracy. That's according to the International Maritime Bureau. There have been several abductions reported in recent months. In July, 10 Turkish sailors were taken off the coast of Nigeria. And in August, 8 crew members were taken from a German-owned vessel off Cameroon. There have been 62 seafarers captured this year in the region. Although piracy is on the decrease worldwide, it continues to rise, and there are fears it could begin to emulate Somalia and threat shipping. I'm now joined by Stephen Askins, who's a lawyer and a maritime security expert. Are we seeing an increase in piracy off the coast of West Africa?
Actually, no. It's been pretty constant. It was masked for a few years by the terrible events of Somalia. But actually, as you said, there's been 60-odd crew members taken this year. And that's today and yesterday, over the weekend, that's probably the 15th, 16th vessel that's been attacked where crew have been kidnapped during this year. But we always see a bit of an upturn just before Christmas.
Why is that?
I'm not sure, actually, but it's it'll be a factor of weather, it'll be a factor of who's available and the kit they've got available. But we generally, over the Christmas period, and into the new year, you do see an upsurge in piracy.
I mean, if it's been this serious for this long, why has the rest of the world seemingly turned a blind eye to it?
I'm not sure that they have. I think one of the big differences between Somalia and the West African coast is that we can't see that same international naval presence which was so effective in the end in the Gulf of Aden and in the Indian Ocean. So this is very much a West African problem to solve, and the cliche is that you solve piracy on land, and therefore you need the West African governments really to implement some kind of policy which is going to be effective in getting rid of the scourge. And although the attacks are off Togo or Cameroon, 99% of the time it is Nigerian pirates that are carrying out the attacks.
And why can't we see this multinational intervention naval force off the Bight of Benin, as the waters there are called, as we saw in Somalia? Why is it so difficult to put one together? Is it because this is a less important international shipping area than the coast of Somalia was?
No, I don't think it's less important, but I think that the local governments feel that they have the capability, unlike, for example, Somalia, to do much more about it. And the other problem is, the thing about Somalia and the Indian Ocean, it was about transits. People could put armed guards at either end of the voyage, and they became a very good risk mitigator. That sort of scenario is not possible in the Gulf of Guinea. And tragically, we have an armed guard that was killed, but that will invariably be a local military person from the local army or navy, and it's very, very unusual to see an armed guard in those circumstances being killed.
Okay, Stephen Askins, thanks a lot for your insight into this story. Much appreciated. Thank you. This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News with me, Peter Okwache. Still to come on the programme, we've got Mimi with the sport, as Cameroon's goalkeeper Andre Onana gets a glowing review ahead of their Champions League fixture at Stamford Bridge. I'm Peter Okwache. The top stories this hour. South Africa's victorious rugby team have been given a hero's homecoming. These are live shots from the Oliver R. Tambo Airport in Johannesburg. And a major aid effort has begun in southern Somalia for the victims of devastating floods in the south. Concerns of an outbreak of deadly disease. Now, a BBC investigation has uncovered the shocking scale of self-harm and suicide material being shared across networks of private Instagram attacks. The investigation focuses on a 17-year-old Norwegian teenager called Andrina, who live posted the moments leading up to her taking her own life. Analysis by Norwegian journalists have revealed that she was linked to another 1,000 accounts, all posting similar dangerous content. A warning that the following short clip from the BBC News report contains elements that are upsetting.
Heidi's daughter Andrina killed herself in 2017, a month before her 18th birthday. But it wasn't until earlier this year that Heidi discovered she'd posted her suicide on Instagram. Andrina's mobile phone had been unopened since her death. When Heidi got into it, she found a secret, locked Instagram account where Andrina had documented her struggles with mental health problems, self-harming, and finally her suicide.
The hardest thing was that she had documented her last days, her last hours. It was almost like she was screaming her death.
So this is our investigation room. This is where
Heidi learned about the account from Norwegian journalists investigating suicide and self-harm communities on Instagram. She let the investigation team use the phone to go through Andrina's followers and in turn their followers. They found connections to 1,000 locked secret accounts across 20 countries, all posting similar and often disturbing content.
Well, Instagram has banned all graphic images of self-harm and restricted videos and pictures showing suicidal themes. And in the past month, they say they've extended that ban to include memes, drawings and cartoons that promote suicide or show suicide and self-harm methods. How prevalent is this across Africa? Let's talk about these issues now with Cassandra Govinder. She's a clinical psychologist with the South African Depression and Anxiety Group. Cassandra, how much does this issue affect young people across Africa?
Well, in a global study conducted in 2018, we see that amongst the 28 countries that were interviewed, South Africa has the highest prevalence of cyberbullying and issues with suicide linked to that. So I think in South Africa it's quite prevalent, but obviously we need more information in African countries around that.
And what's being done to tackle this?
I think it's a really difficult topic because you have quite a disparate population here where there's a lot of people that have access to smartphones, the internet, and therefore are susceptible to cyberbullying, and then a lot of people who don't. So I think we're still trying to catch up with the difference in that and how to monitor it. I think as parents, as schools, understanding the age we live in now is very different to the age that most people have grown up in, most adults have grown up in. And I think that we need to do a lot of education around that.
So what can parents, for instance, do? And in fact, do parents even know the signs of trouble? Is it just enough to go and snatch a teenager's smartphone from him?
Well, I think that would probably be a terrible idea, as kids are really smart, okay? They can access sites a number of ways. They don't necessarily need their cell phone to do it. I think the best way to do it is parents need to, I think, understand how dangerous it is for children to be online, and in terms of adolescents and children when they're online, what they can be exposed to. And the answer is not to block them away from it, because I think it will increase the likelihood that you get them on the sites, but rather to talk with them around what the dangers are and how they can manage it.
And is there a place where parents and indeed children with these issues can actually go and seek for help?
I don't think there's a specific place dedicated to this, because as I say, this is a very new age issue, and I think we're all still coming to terms with understanding what it means and how to combat it. But a place like the South African Depression and Anxiety Group you can always call in, as it's a call center from anywhere across South Africa and sometimes even Africa if you can reach across internationally. Call in and get information around this and some sort of help around how to tackle it.
You mentioned the fact that, parents have grown up in a completely different era from where their children are growing up now. I mean, is social media, or just how much is social media to blame for some of these mental health issues?
Well, I think we need to understand suicide specifically as something of an extreme. So it's an extreme expression of distress. There are a number of things that lead up to someone committing suicide. And perhaps social media is the straw that breaks the camel's back, or maybe it's even the catalyst to start the mental health challenges. So I think it plays a significant role, but I wouldn't say it plays the only role.
All right, Cassandra Govender, clinical psychologist with the South Africa Depression and Anxiety Group. Thank you very much for your input into this issue.
Thanks.
And if you're affected by the issues we were discussing there, please reach out to available support organizations where you are. You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. It's now time for some sports and Mimi celebrations, jubilations, everything happening in South Africa at the moment.
Indeed, Peter. And we're going to go back right now to Johannesburg, South Africa for some live pictures of arrivals. Just a few minutes ago, the coach Rassie Erasmus and the captain Siya Kolisi arrived at the airport. We can see throughout the day, the players were arriving. They had different flights coming, but it's such a momentous occasion for South Africa. Their coach Erasmus had spoken about how when he appointed Siya Kolisi as their first black captain for South Africa, he wasn't sure about the reaction. He didn't think about the reaction, what it would mean for the country. And he says Siya Kolisi has handled it so well, and it's just so wonderful to see how it's uniting the country. Let's move on to some other sports. The Special Presidential Investigation Panel, or SPIP, has dropped its corruption case against 5 officials of the Nigeria Football Federation, including President Amaju Pinnick. The case, which was made up of 16 charges, was dismissed at the Abuja High Court on Tuesday following a dissolution of the SPIP in September. But there are 2 other cases still pending. Oluwashina Okeleji with more on the story.
Tuesday's ruling has not come as a major surprise to keen followers of the game in Nigeria, because the federal government of the country has since dissolved the SPIP panel that brought those charges against top officials of the Nigerian Football Federation. This latest development is separate from 2 separate cases brought by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission against the NFF, as well as an ongoing probe from the ICPC, which has since seized properties belonging to the quintet of the Nigerian Football Federation. But all 5 members of the NFF have all denied any wrongdoing.
And two games are kicking off shortly in the group stage of the Champions League, with Barcelona playing at home to Slavia Praha. There are 6 more ties that will kick off across Europe. In just over an hour's time, the defending champions Liverpool are playing at home to Genk. And at their press conference on Monday ahead of the game, Jurgen Klopp said that Sadio Mane was not a diver following a booking over the weekend. And Europa League winners Chelsea host Ajax at Stamford Bridge. Chelsea are boosted by the return of N'Golo Kante from injury. For Ajax, one of the key players for them is that Cameroon goalkeeper Andre Onana. His head coach has been speaking about how he can be one of the very best.
Yeah, Onana also fantastic development, and he's one of our key players, and goalkeeper is so important to get success, and he proved that so a lot of times in all the in the Eredivisie, but definitely also in the Champions League. He's in his goalie work, he's really that good, and he's so young, and to get even more experience, and he will be one of the world's best goalkeepers.
And that's all the sport. Peter, back to you.
Many thanks, Mimi. Thank you very much. Now, let's meet 8-year-old Ayeyi, who has become a source of inspiration for many people on social media and in her native Ghana. She suffers from a condition known as osteogenesis imperfecta, or OI, which can cause her brittle bones to break at the slightest movement. But despite the pain a fracture brings, Ayeyi loves to dance and refuses to let the condition define her. The BBC's Pauline Odiambo reports.
I can stretch my arm, but I can stretch my brain. My name is Ifya Ayyaramwate. I am 8 years old. I have osteogenesis imperfecta, which means my bones are soft, it can break easily. Much stronger.
She may not be able to walk, but gradually and with support, Ayeyi has finally learned to stand.
Grandma, I think I can do that now.
According to experts, osteogenesis imperfecta is a genetic condition which cannot be cured. But this hasn't dampened Ayeyi's bubbly spirit.
I love to sing, I love to dance, I also love to read, and I also love to play.
But sometimes, playtime can end in multiple fractures.
If I throw something, then I will break my bone. If I stretch my arm, I can break my bone. Every time when I broke my bone, my mom will put something, then she will rub it, then it will heal and heal and heal.
It is estimated that 5 out of every 100,000 people worldwide are born with osteogenesis imperfecta. Ghana's figures on the condition are not readily available, and treatment options in the country are limited.
The common medication that's given is called bisphosphonates, which helps strengthening the bone.
According to science, Ayeyi's condition is expected to worsen as she gets older. However, water therapy and other exercises have helped.
So you do your legs first on your back.
In addition to dealing with the physical challenges of the condition, Ayeyi's parents have also had to deal with the stigma associated with raising a disabled child.
Ever since she came into our life, I think I've had more positive blessings than the negative. And there's nothing you lose when you help such children.
To stretch your mind. I can stretch my arm like everybody does. But with the help of God, I can stretch my brain so I can do great things.
Isn't she just incredible? Young Ayeyi there. That's it on Focus on Africa for today. We'll leave you with those pictures of the South African team arriving at the ORT airport in Johannesburg. Good night.